Okay, we're gonna talk more about the Hajj just now and speak to different people. And by the way, yourself, it's not always easy. We know that, but is there someone that you'd like us to talk to who's in Mina, in the tent city of Mina right now? If there is someone, what about just WhatsApping us? 061 766 0355. 061 766 0355. And if they are happy to talk, we will talk to them. Short, sharp, or they could even send a voice note. Either way, I mean, they can talk live, they could send a voice note depending on where they are, and we're happy to take all those messages on two levels. One is the people who are on the Hajj. So if you can connect us to them, we'll do that. But you, as the family of the Hujjaj, if you want to send a message, a voice note message, we want to pick that up and we're happy to share that right away as well. So do that 061 766 0355, right? Well, let's move on to other things just for the moment, okay? They say what 24 hours is a long time in the life of a country. 48 hours is even longer. So much has happened in Russia over the weekend. I don't know how much you know, but let's find out about, you know, I think three important people. Vladimir Putin, the leader of Russia, on the one hand, the group called the Wagner group on the second hand, and then the leader of that group, Yevgeny Prigozhin, and what that really means. So we'll try and unpack all of that with my guest, Professor the Thabo Mbeki African School of Public and International Affairs, Professor Anthoni van Nieuwkerk. Appreciate your time and thanks for joining us. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for the invitation to talk to you.
Right. So I did say that 24 hours is a long time, 48 hours even longer. What has been happening in Russia over the last few days, over the weekend, in fact?
Yeah. No, much is happening. I mean, we're talking about a country that is at war with another country, or if you want a broader perspective, Russia in conflict with NATO, and all of this plays out in the Ukraine. And so it's a war situation, and anything can happen almost overnight, and does happen. This particular case that really drew our attention relates to a internal conflict that was a long time in the making. It didn't happen overnight. It had, roots. There's a problem that grew over time, and it had to be resolved at some way or the other. And indeed, when this tension broke open, it happened very fast, hour by hour, over the course of a day or two. And indeed, we've seen the resolution of this particular internal conflict, if you want. And I must say, just for starters, when Putin's rule or reign was challenged by one of the military strong men inside Russia, the Western media and the Americans in particular jumped on this event as if it was going to now introduce regime change, the end of Putin, the end of Russia's war in Ukraine, the beginning of a new world order. And I must say, I was skeptical about this kind of interpretation from the beginning. And I must say it was wishful thinking. And the challenge of Wagner and its head was really short-lived and pretty weak on balance. And I think the expectations of the Western media similarly weak and challenged and short-lived.
Interesting. So perhaps just for those that don't know, maybe just give us the facts in terms of what happened first. There was a challenge, and I'm going to just use words because I don't know any better. Was it an attempted coup? Was it an insurrection? So what happened? Yeah. What happened after that? What's the state of play between them then? And then we'll do some analysis of what that really means for all of us. Yeah.
Okay. All right. No, that's not a problem. So Russia at war in Ukraine. It has a pretty big army headed up by a Russian Minister of Defense, Shoigu. Like in most other countries, there's a country, there's an army. It's fairly disciplined. It has structures and hierarchy, But in the case of Russia, it is a strange thing for us to understand. Inside this hierarchy is a bunch of mercenaries. These are soldiers who fight for money. And you have to ask from the beginning, why would Putin and his Minister of Foreign Defense tolerate such a aberration, if you want? Because they developed a life of their own. It's called the Wagner Group. In fact, they became so successful in waging very brutal war that they exported their expertise to countries who call for them. And here in Africa, we know Wagner. In fact, across the border, our neighbor, the Mozambican government, made a phone call to Wagner to say, can you help us deal with violent extremism in Cabo Delgado? Wagner tried but failed. But Wagner is not failing in the Central African Republic or Mali or the Sahel, where its services, guns for hire, is on display in very brutal warfare against violent extremism in the Sahel and elsewhere in Africa. So this is the nature of the instrument. And of course, I think at some point Putin had to make a decision. This cannot be tolerated. And Wagner was also deployed to fight at the front lines in Ukraine.
Okay, so they allies. I mean, in effect, up till now, they're allies and very strong allies, right? But then have I got it right?
Yes.
Have I got it right then that Yevgeny Prigozhin then in fact from Wagner made a play then for a higher position? Is that correct? I mean, is that the issue here?
Yeah, so, well, let me add another complicating factor. We are talking about strong men, military men, not necessarily pleasant or diplomatic. Hard men fighting, attracting younger guys to the front lines. Many people die in the process. He was a restaurateur. He was a chef. He served food to Putin. They developed some kind of a friendship. The guy ends up as a mercenary. He brings many men under his control. He fights for money. At some point, this relationship couldn't work. And here's the thing: what precipitated the crisis is Preso Green decided to confront Shoigu, the Minister of Defense, over the following issue. Wagner and his mercenaries wanted the Ukraine war to move faster, harder, deeper, more brutal. Wipe out the Ukrainians, in fact, get rid of the weapons that flows in from Europe. And Putin and his defense force has another strategy of the war in Ukraine. That is the conversation we can have at another time, is the Putin longer-term strategy to deal with Ukraine and Europe. This mercenary overthrew the kind of thinking that Putin had, and at some point they had to come to a confrontation. The mercenaries moved to Moscow. They had high demands, as I explained, and Putin said, no, I'm not going to give in to these demands. It's intolerable that inside your defense force, there's another force that is making demands on my Minister of Defense. And they negotiated the crisis. In fact, Putin used a brother of his in Belarus, to make sort of a peace deal, which is to put Prigozhin into exile, to remove him from the front line, to let him cool off. The challenge now is to take Wagner and all these hardened men, the fighting force, to demilitarize and reintegrate them into either the regular army or into society at large. And also the question that I think is very difficult for us as Africans to understand is what will happen to Wagner's plans in Africa, because they are literally, moving around the continent. So they
I want to talk about that. I'll talk about that in a moment. Let's just talk about so the Wagner group, or let's talk about Prigozhin. So now, am I right that he's already in exile in neighboring Belarus? And part of that, he's got immunity. I mean, can we take it as a given that's going to happen? Because normally, if there's an attempt against the leadership of a country, you either get imprisoned or you get executed. I mean, that's normally what happens.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So you earlier asked, I forgot to answer. Yes, is this an overthrow, a coup d'état, regime change? I think it's less than that. I think it was a mutiny. So it's a group of armed men inside a structure that rises up and have specific demands. Putin could have gone the hard way and said, I'm going to put you, a court case of some sort, find you guilty, take you out, put you in jail for the rest of your life, etc., etc. A deal was made in order, I think, for Putin to keep the peace inside his own organization. And that is to say to the guy, we make a deal. We'll drop all charges, because there was a mutiny means you use weapons to try and make demands, and people died in the process. There was a march on Moscow, people died in the process.
Yeah.
So Putin is saying, I will give you immunity, we'll drop the charges, you go into exile, we will take Wagner and reconfigurate this relationship so that it doesn't constitute a threat to my authority. This is very far removed from removing Putin from power, or for Russia to undergo a regime change. That is not on the cards at the moment. I think Putin is very much in control of Russia.
Okay, but does it show a weaker Putin versus the hard man or hard stance Putin in his relationship with NATO and the Ukraine? I mean, do we see if not a softer side, a more vulnerable side to him?
Possibly. There's commentators who make that analysis. Mine is different. I think that Putin is a chess player par excellence. He moves the pieces on the board, and what he's done was to move the Wagner group and the threat that it posed to his own internal authority sideways. It doesn't mean that he's weaker. It means that he made some clever moves to remove this threat, which potentially in the future could have become much worse. And he did this with minimal bloodshed, by the way, because his focus is elsewhere. His focus is on Ukraine, and his focus is on how to deal with NATO in the longer run. So this was a temporary setback, and I doubt that it showed his weakness. It showed another side of him, which is he's a smart negotiator.
Okay, I'm just thinking as you're talking about the chessboard. So he's like sort of sacrificed a couple of pawns because he's got his sights on the bishop and the king and the queen, and he knows exactly how he wants to get there. So let's see. Okay, what about let's just talk about you made the point about the rising expectations, more even almost like a frenzy from the Western media. I was like, here's our opportunity. I mean, for regime change, because that's really what they were talking about, right? What does this then say about Western media, and what does it say about, again, Western governments, if they said anything that suggested, hey, here's an opportunity? Because again, I'm saying it in the context of, political meddling. We had the example of Pakistan and what's happened with Imran Khan, the former World Cup winning cricket captain, and one criticism of the USA, and within a week or so he's gone, right? What does that say about meddling that we don't quite understand here?
Yeah, let's take one step back and say that in conflicts of this nature, which now has become almost international in nature, information and disinformation, propaganda, and cyber espionage becomes instruments of war. And so you have to be, as a consumer of news and listening to commentators, maybe you and me included, Ashraf, the listeners must ask themselves, is the source reliable? And we do know, and the best way to answer that question is to make sure that you listen to more than one version of the same event. In fact, as an academic, I would say to my students, you must triangulate your sources before you write down any conclusions. Get the story from 3 different angles. So what we know is that the media that comes from America, the mainstream media, the media houses that dominate global news, and I'm talking about CNN, BBC, you might even throw in Al Jazeera if you want. They're really powerful and strong ones that dominate the narratives. Many of them are aligned. They are not neutral. We know this game that is being played. Are you neutral? Are you non-aligned? And so on. So we know that the big media houses that drives the dominant news stories of the day are aligned to the foreign policy objectives and principles of the Americans and the Europeans, which together form an alliance, which militarily we call NATO, and economically we call the G7, and diplomatically we call the Security Council of the United Nations, at least 3 of the 5. And so the challenge really for us is to understand, why would the main news media of the day, within hours of a move in Ukraine, come up with a story that tends to tell, look, here's a coup in the making, it's the end of Putin, there's going to be a regime change. All of this is a speculation, or maybe is a manipulation of the facts, to suggest to the lead the American and the European approach to Russia is the correct one, is on the winning path, and that Russia and Putin in particular is on the losing path. And let me add one more sentence. The NATO, the Americans and the Europeans, and those who support this kind of alliance, have invested very heavily, including the military-industrial complex and also financiers, to make sure that Russia is degraded, isolated, contained, neutralized, and that Ukraine at some point will have to be rebuilt so that Europe and NATO can move in there to make sure that Moscow remains under control for the next period of time. This is an attempt to make sure that Russia, which is now an irritant in the eyes of the dominant West, is put on the side, because the real battle will start with the Chinese in coming years, if not already. Yeah. And so I think the media is being used to drive this kind of narrative, this kind of story, and it was on display, Ashraf, at its best. This is a good thing that happened, because we saw in the course of one day how this kind of media exposed themselves in terms of analyzing a situation through ideological lenses. Quite shocking.
So many questions to ask. So one is the role of the media. Then what is mainstream media? Someone said yesterday, in fact, it's like Twitter's mainstream media. Things have just changed. You don't have to answer that. Just things have absolutely changed, right? The other is, yes, the expectations, how there's propaganda at play now, and we need to understand that. And your point about, check your sources. Are the sources reliable? And then, of course, the future of Russia and Ukraine. But maybe the last thing for now, besides the fact that even mercenaries exist. I mean, that's another whole conversation. Like, why do they even exist in the first place? But another conversation. Here's the last thing. In the middle of all this, there's a little problem called South Africa and the BRICS summit in August. Any potential significance in this chessboard game that we're playing, that somehow that issue will have changed in the last 2 days? Never mind the diplomacy discussions of the previous 2 months.
Yeah. I mean, I saw Twitter is a source of information now, or disinformation, if you want, very powerful. And I forgot to say, it's very easy for us to find information about Ukraine by listening to the mainstream media. If you want to understand the Russian point of view or the Ukrainian point of view, you have to dig very deep. I can't tune into RT. You have to go to Sputnik News and all the rest of it. It's hard work to get the balanced view. And in that process, I saw a tweet that says that if Putin is removed in this turmoil, this armed, resistance from Wagner, this will solve our problem. He won't come to the BRICS summit. I don't think this is going to happen. I listened to President Ramaphosa last night at the Western Cape conference, where he appeared overconfident and very happy. And he said, no, the BRICS summit will continue. We will host it. So it's not going to be moved to China or to some other country. But intriguingly, he doesn't tell us, and he doesn't inform the media whether Putin will arrive or not. And the only way to resolve this issue for us as South Africans is if Parliament can rush through a amendment to legislation that will allow any sitting head of state to receive full immunity for the period of a summit. If that doesn't happen, then I think we're in big trouble. Putin wants to come. He's that kind of personality. You're not going to put him on a live feed like you're doing with me. You want to be there in person. He's big, he's larger than life. He's a powerful personality. So are all the BRICS heads of state, by the way. And allow me to say maybe one thing about BRICS. This summit has the potential to change global politics, because if the 5 BRICS heads of state find it in themselves to quickly invite, by agreeing on the rules of membership, inviting significant regional players to join the BRICS alliance. For example, Saudi Arabia, or Nigeria, or Algeria, or Iran, etc., or maybe somebody from South America as well. The nature of the BRICS alliance will now become a real threat in the eyes of the West. And by the way, all of this propaganda, disinformation, and information campaigns that are being waged is precisely to try and control or steer the contours of this emerging new world order, or disorder, if you want.
And that's why I want to remain a talk show host. It's so fascinating indeed. Intrigue after intrigue after intrigue. Thank you so much. Really great chatting to you. Lots to pick out from the many things you said. By the way, if you are on Twitter, feel free to tweet some of your comments further on and just, tag me and Solar Media. We'll certainly amplify that. I think there's important points that's come through. Thank you for your time. Most appreciated. Anthoni van Nieuwkerk, the professor at the Thabo Mbeki African School of Public and International Affairs, talking about the issue called the Wagners and what does it mean. But that point about the chessboard game, I think, is what's going to stick with me. We'll get back to the bigger chessboard to try and earn the rewards from Allah on this, the first day of Hajj 1444.